As the Darfur conflict lingers, Sudan's government is coming under increasing pressure. But even that pressure has yielded few results so far. Just where does a solution to the Darfur problem lie? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the special edition of Inside Story from Khartoum. I'm Imran Gupta. For the last 4 years, Darfur has made headlines around the world. An international effort spearheaded by global powers and a number of NGOs has cornered the government of Sudan. Sanctions have been imposed, arms embargoes and ceasefires agreed, but very little has worked. Plans to deploy all of a UN-AU hybrid force have also hit a lot of stumbling blocks. As a consequence, some say that the violence in Darfur at the moment is only increasing. Now, to add a twist to the tale, a recent attack by one of the rebel movements in Darfur on the doorstep of the capital of Sudan threw the whole peace process into question. Rawia Ragi has more.
By all accounts, it was a brazen attack, one that took most everyone by surprise. Darfur rebels no longer confined to the vast but distant western region. They got very close to Khartoum's seat of power. The May 10th attack on the capital's twin city Omdurman left more than 100 people killed and scores injured. It left any hope for peace in Darfur in tatters.
Yes, we are for peace, but there is no place for dialogue with treacherous perpetrators who sold their nation and values.
Rebels from the Justice and Equality movement slowly advanced from Darfur and Kordofan. They were initially intercepted by the army and bloody confrontations followed. The GEM, which took up arms against the government in 2003, has long complained about the marginalization of the people of Darfur. Their attack on Omdurman, they said, was an attempt to show Khartoum the kind of carnage Darfuris go through on a daily basis. The group's leader, Khalil Ibrahim, vowed he won't back down. Khartoum responded by putting a bounty on his head. Earlier talks between the Sudanese government and various Darfur rebel groups in November had faltered, and observers had been warning of a worsening situation in the western region ever since. But the attack on Omdurman took the crisis to a whole new level, with Khartoum accusing neighboring Chad of backing the rebels and both countries cutting ties. The Darfur debacle has now exceeded being a fight over resources and land allocation, turning into an even larger battle for power. In an interview with the regional paper, Khalil Ibrahim even went as far as saying his goal was, quote, one state that includes Egypt, Libya and Chad. Ibrahim remains on the run, but his fiery statements have not stopped. This as the people of Omdurman continue to grapple with the memory of the attack, and as the people of Darfur face an unraveling peace process. Rawia Ragi for Inside Story.
Well, joining us here in Khartoum to discuss this issue are our guests, Mr. Mohammed Ali Mardi. He is Sudan's former Minister of Justice. Next to him, Dr. Bashir Bakri, a retired diplomat and head of the UN Society in Khartoum. And Ambassador Bubu Niang. He's the special advisor to the African Union's special envoy to Darfur and a member of the joint mediation support team of the AU and the UN. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. If I could start off with you, Mr. Al-Mardi, this attack by the rebels, taking the fight right to the doorstep of the capital at Omdurman, did it surprise you?
Very much, because before this incident took place, Khalil announced that he is all out for negotiations with the government of the Sudan. And in fact, that was a plot. He tried to deceive people. He said he intended to enter into negotiations, whereas he was at the same time preparing for this attack. It is an unfortunate occurrence, and it clearly shows that they lack the political will to reach settlement, because the Darfur issue is a political one. It cannot be solved by military means, especially as they were using foreign elements.
Do you believe that Chad was behind it?
Absolutely sure.
But what evidence do you have?
The evidence came from the people who participated in this attack, and they gave voluntary judicial confessions.
Jem officially still denies any support from Chad, and Chad denies supporting Jem. Let's bring in Dr. Bashir Bakri. On this very program, a few weeks ago, we spoke to Ali Al-Haj Muhammad from Hassan Turabi's party, and he spoke to us. He said the Omdurman attack could have the same effect as the Libyan attack in 1976 that led to reconciliation. So he was saying that this attack could have a positive ramification.
No, I don't think so. There's a great difference between that one and the one here. I attended that one of 1976. It was just, by chance. I was coming from Paris, and I accompanied the head of our state at that time, Nimeri, and some other ministers, and we were going to the African Unity meeting in one of the islands in Mauritius, and we were surprised by that attack. But we knew the people, we knew what Sadiq was doing, we knew what the others were doing, But I think it is really not comparable at all.
Ambassador Niang, the rebels traveled over 1,000 kilometers to get close to the capital, Khartoum. They traveled in over 130 land cruisers across a large part of land. Surely the UN-AU role comes into question here, that they were undetected from Darfur right up until Khartoum.
Yeah, you know that the deployment of UNAMID has experienced some delay, and it is regrettable, because I think if the UNAMID was given sufficient number of troops and the adequate equipment, they could have played a better role. But as you know, UNAMID is experiencing almost the same problems as the African Union mission, because it is ill-equipped, and the fund, they have the funds, there is no problem, but they don't have the equipment, they don't have the resources necessary to cover Darfur, which is the size of France, as everybody knows.
Muhammad Ali Al-Mardi, are we all in agreement that there's no political horizon at this moment regarding Darfur?
No, I wouldn't say that there isn't any political horizon. But this attack had made things more difficult than it used to be. We in the Sudan, we have the political will. We are still driving for peace through peaceful means, through negotiations. It remains for the rebel movements, one, to unite together, to come up with constructive proposals, although we may disagree with them, but still they should give certain something we all build on, and to get convinced that they wouldn't achieve anything through military means. They will just destroy Darfur more and more and make the peace prospects more difficult.
Well, you're saying the government of Sudan wants to negotiate, but there's a bounty on Khalil Ibrahim's head, the leader of Jem. Surely that's not an indication that the government wants to negotiate with him.
Khalil is not the only movement in the arena. Khalil is a special case.
So what about others like Abdul Wahid
Khalil doesn't want negotiations, and he is not free to discuss. So long as he is being supported and provided and instructed by foreign powers, we don't think that he is qualified to sit with people and to reach. But still, we look on other military movements to come to the negotiation table.
I see you nodding in agreement. Do you believe that if the rebels were unified, negotiations would be easier?
Well, I can't agree more with the minister, and I think the concept of peace is should be totally different than what is now conceived either in the international society or even in the rebels or the Sudan government. I think that peace couldn't be realized without development. You know, Darfur is a particular case. We have only one Darfur in the Arab countries, and that's here in the Sudan. You know, Darfur is a very rich country, not because only of Jabal Burra, because of the water and because of the forest and so on and so forth. But we know, I visited Darfur many times, and I reckon that all the small credit industries developed in Darfur far better than any place in the Sudan. And I think that the Darfur people, they are known for this development attitude. But if we start to talk about the rebels or the governments, or even the international community, we miss the conception. The conception is that Darfur needs development. How can we develop Darfur? Development and peace, but peace through development.
Ambassador Niang, some of the criticism of the UN-AU hybrid force is that there is no peace to keep. So how can it possibly work effectively?
Of course, you are right, because the UNAMID, the United Nations and African Union mission, is a peacekeeping operation. It's not a peace enforcing operation. So normally they would have been deployed after there is peace. But the fact is that there is no peace. But everybody thought that with the deployment of UNAMID, if UNAMID was given the necessary means and the necessary strengths, they could have contributed in bringing some kind of peace, some kind of security. For example, the protection of the civilians, the protections of the IDPs. This would have created conducive environment for the negotiations to proceed. But unfortunately, as you said, there is no peace, and the UNAMID has not got yet the strengths necessary for it to play a role, a visible role, for the Darfurians to feel that there is the African Union and United Nations forces on the ground, and that they have a kind of security, and this will encourage the negotiations to move forward.
You're the top advisor to Salim Ahmed Salim, the AU Special Envoy to Darfur. What's at the top of your agenda when you advise him?
You know, we have tried everything. I was involved in the Abuja negotiations, and in Abuja we tried everything. Unfortunately, we came up with the Darfur Peace Agreement, which was not signed by all the parties, and you know the difficulties which ensured for the implementation of this agreement. So after that, the mandate which was given to us, to the special envoys and then to the AU UN mediation, was to try to have an all-inclusive process, to try to bring all the parties which did not sign the agreement to come on board. So for that, we have tried to help the reunification of the movements. You touched upon it a few minutes ago. And we have supported all the regional and then international efforts which was geared towards helping the movements to unify. But this was not our total priority, because we know it is very difficult to unite such movements. And don't forget that these movements are new movements, and also they need some experience to come together. But we tried, and in Arusha, we tried to bring them together and give them a platform where they can discuss among themselves without the presence of the government, without the presence of the international partners or regional partners, for them to discuss and then try to come to a common delegation, if it is possible, to common positions for negotiations, if it is possible. But unfortunately, this one did not succeed. And after that, you know, the security situation deteriorated because of the fragmentation of the movements, because of clashes between the government and the movements, because of intertribal clashes, and then because of banditry and a lot of things of that kind. So we tried to address the issue of security first, because we thought that with the help of UNAMID, although they don't have the full strength, but we thought that they could play a positive role. We should go for informal consultations on security to try to reduce the level of violence in Darfur, which will enable us to start the talks. Unfortunately, until now also we haven't succeeded in that. But I think our priority is to continue because this is our mandate, it is our job, and we hope that we will be able to bring the parties together. When I say the parties, it's the movements and the government together so that we can start the negotiations.
Let's bring in Muhammad Ali Al-Mardi. A little bit earlier on, Dr. Bakri mentioned the north-south issue and in relation to Darfur, he mentioned Naivasha. I wonder, was the success of the southern rebels, the SPLM, at Naivasha in the comprehensive peace agreement, the trigger that led all the rebel groups in Darfur to think that by dint of armed struggle, they could achieve autonomy and maybe even secession?
Yes, the main difference between the government, the Darfur movements and the SPLA is that the SPLA was a united body. It has the will to make decisions and to take decisions and to pose one single opinion. That's why it was easy to agree with them or to differ with them. But the situation is quite different with respect to the Darfur movements.
But they were inspired by it,
There is
definitely.
virtually very little in common between them. And that will make things difficult. It is difficult to reach an agreement with 7 or 8 or 10 movements. Each one has its own agenda. So this is one of the main problems. And the other thing is that the United States and the United Nations and the European countries helped the Naivasha talks reach a good end.
Are you saying they're not helping now?
Between the north
But
and
in
the south.
Darfur, are you saying that they're not helping?
It is quite different. Now the United Nations is not playing a constructive role as it should with respect to the Darfur. They are treating the government of Sudan as if it were a military movement. This is an official government with international recognition.
Does it upset you when they call what's happening in Darfur genocide?
It does upset us because they have got very vast agenda, media, and this will circulate to the whole world, whereas our capabilities are very limited. So all people will hear just one story. We are not upset because it may be true or not. No, because it's not true. They know it is not true, and they do not help the government in the Sudan establish peace and security. And instead of that, they are just sanctioning and penalizing the government of Sudan and treating the government as if it were a military movement.
We're talking about...
We have our constitutional and legal responsibilities as a government, as a de facto and legal and constitutional government. Why do they deprive us from practicing our authority in our geographical region, the Sudan? For example, the decision of the resolution of the Security Council number 1591, it curtailed the movement of the Sudanese forces and even the police forces, and at the same time they were blaming the government for not protecting the civilians. How come? How can the government?
Well, to add to this, talking about, as you say, this campaign against Sudan, let's bring in Dr. Bakri. Does it help or hinder the prospects of peace when the International Criminal Court prosecutor, Luis Moreno Ocampo, said very recently, quote, "The entire Darfur region is a crime scene," and he went on to say that Sudan's government acts with impunity. How do you feel about that? Does it help or hinder the process?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't have a great respect to this man because you see, impunity, we are all against impunity. But I want to say one point before answering you.
Go ahead.
And that's the following. The rebels didn't follow the right way from Nevaja. The right way from Nevaja, that what was achieved after peace, development, now participation in the government, and they are going in the right way, well, with some difficulties here or that. But they followed another road, which is war, instead of following peace to realize development. This is what I was saying. Well, when you are talking of the International Court of Rome, I know that the ex-Minister of Justice was a member perhaps of the preparation of the negotiation of Rome Treaty in Rome, you know. But we are not a member of this court, you see. I don't think we are obliged. And then, even so, the prosecutor doesn't mean at all that he has no peaceful intentions and peaceful role. Even if the Security Council gave him this mandate, well, he himself should have a way how to realize peace instead of complicating things and inject war. By the way, most, if not all, the non-governmental organizations coming from outside in Darfur, they are non-development organizations. They are just after human rights, and well, of course we reckon human rights. We should have human rights, and but you see, there is not a single non-governmental organization from outside came with a development intention.
Ambassador Bubuniang, with regards to the humanitarian aspect of this, are we running out of time?
I think so, because this conflict has lasted for the past 5 years. And we thought when we started the process in Abuja that within 2 years maximum we would have achieved peace, at least obtained an agreement, and that the humanitarian efforts would be diverted towards development efforts, because we think what is lacking, as Dr. Bakri has said, in Darfur is development. Of course, you have the issue of power sharing, you have the issue of security arrangements, but we think that if this humanitarian crisis was resolved, and it can be resolved only when you have peace. If you don't have peace, the humanitarian crisis will continue. So if it was resolved, we would have devoted all these resources which are being spent for humanitarian assistance to developments of Darfur. And I think that the Darfurians would be better off than living in the IDP camps and receiving humanitarian assistance.
Gentlemen, it's been insightful hearing your thoughts. It's been a fascinating program. Muhammad Ali Mardi, Dr. Bashir Bakri, and Ambassador Bubuniang, thank you very much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us here on Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and your suggestions. You can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye-bye for now.